Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for a generous, totally undeserved, but gratefully received introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, we are told that around 700 million people, give or take 20 million, are contemplating leaving their birthplace and their friends and going elsewhere. And we're also told that of this rather substantial number, about a third, give or take 20 million, give as their first choice the United States and Canada. A second choice, the United Kingdom. A third choice, Western Europe. And then Australia and New Zealand. And Western Europe, with a kind of rider that a proportion of those who prefer to go to Western Europe are really thinking that it's easier to get to Spain or Portugal or France or Scandinavia or something, and then walk to Calais and get on the Eurostar, and not into it, under it, and hang on until they cross the channel. So this is an interesting situation. I have no idea whether 700 million is entirely correct, but it's around that figure. So I was not astonished to discover that Professor Kenneth Minogue, who's just written a magnificent book called The Servile Mind. I strongly recommend it. I just reviewed it for Quadrant, so it's very fresh in my mind, that he observed this situation, and he asks what we ask. Why is it, I'm quoting from him, I don't know how to read, so please forgive me, but here we go. Why is it that they want to come and live among us, and in a sense, live as we do? This is an important question, not only for them, but also for us. Is it democracy? Is it liberty? Is it merely our affluence? Is it perhaps the individualism that might release them from the bondage of custom? Is it perhaps even Christianity, which has so totally shaped the culture of Western life, and which has now, in its broad ecumenical tolerances, almost begun to merge with Western life? The West is all of these things and a great deal more. Now, full stop. This is very important. The West is all of these things and a great deal more. Full stop. Modernity, it's the next sentence. Modernity is, at the very least, a historical moment exhibiting a pattern of life that very few people in the world do not wish to join and to emulate. There's a lot there, but what Professor Minogue is telling us is that West is a metaphor. See, west of Perth is Africa. That's not what you mean. West of California is Korea, China, Japan, Philippines, not what they mean. West is a metaphor for what? For modernity. And this is important because modernity is sustained, I think, by three definitive factors in that they define the thing. Three definitive factors that have deep roots here in this country, and they have received perhaps less attention than they deserve. So I will try briefly to present you these three factors and see what they look like when I finish. Over half a century ago, I was a graduate student at the London School of Economics, and one of the popular witticisms going the rounds was that the English Channel was the widest body of water on Earth. And this is 1952, 53, 54, just a few years before de Gaulle blackballed the entry of Britain to the European Union, European market, the common market, 63 I think it was. But the mood was one, not tense, but it was that kind of mood. But that's not what is important from my point of view tonight. The English Channel is the widest body of water on earth because on one side is the ambit of civil law, which was mentioned today by one of my colleagues. And on the other side is the ambit of the common law. But there are other differences that are almost as dramatic as that one. And the one I want to bring to your attention has gone down in history as the Glorious Revolution, consequences thereof. 1688. Now, the Glorious Revolution, when taught at school, has a very heavy religious connotation, which I think is misleading. There are other aspects of it which would be of greater interest to us when looking at it from our perspective. The religious connotation has virtually disappeared now, but what remains is an affirmation, because the 1688 and 1689 are also regarded at school level as great departures, revolutions. This is the beginning of something. A misreading of Macaulay leads people to think this is the beginning of now. Until then, it was like that. From then until now is different. A serious error. And I would describe 1688 and the Glorious Revolution as a confirmation of something, as a ratification of what had been going on for centuries before, as indicated by James Bennett this afternoon, and had already acquired enough solidity and enough complexity to be responsible for defending a position when challenged by the Stuarts. Now, the Stuarts were attuned to what Western Europe was doing. Let's consider, I mean, I don't want to get pedantic about dates, but the Petition of Right, which is really the beginning of this thing, is 1624. And the Declaration of Right and the Toleration Act, 1689. What's happening in continental Europe on the other side of the Channel? Well, there's Peter the Great, Catherine, not inaugurating, but joining in a period of the enlightened despotisms of the 18th century. In France, there's Louis XIII, and on his right hand, Cardinal Richelieu, the great centralizer. In Spain, Philip IV and the Count Duke of Olivares, another great centralizer. I mean, emphatically so, not accidentally, not surreptitiously, but with gusto. In Prussia, Frederick the Great. So what's happening in England? In England, Charles I read the Riot Act in 1624, say, sign on. What are you signing? Individual freedom? No. Limitations on the crown, limitations on the center, constraints placed on the crown at a time when in the continent of Europe the crown was riding high. At a time when, I'm sorry, Louis XIII and Richelieu, forget about that. Who comes after him? Louis XIV. Europe was moving in one direction, and Charles and the rest of the Stuarts are desperately trying, forget about the Catholicism, to join in. What direction? That of enlightened despotism, of huge centralized power with bureaucracies growing more efficient and more intrusive in the rest of the life of the country. Then comes 1688. In 1688 and 1689, William and Mary have to accept such limitations on their power, on the power of the monarch. And we could go into details and spend 6 months at this, such limitations that throughout the next 150, to be generous, 150 years, England has no court.